Chapter 7 Jiri and Pavla's World-Beating AI. The tall, lanky Jiri Havel was no direct relation to the famous former Czech president Havel, now sadly departed and replaced by those he would probably have despised. Born and brought up in Prague, Jiri's father was a successful corporate lawyer. His mother, the owner of an interior design studio and a small store in Prague's beautiful old town. Young Jiri grew up much loved, but sometimes a little lonely, without other siblings to hang out with. Not too interested in sports, Jiri found mathematics incredibly easy, and at an early age was also writing simple software code rather than watching Czech TV, which is among the worst in Europe. He preferred to lock himself in his room with his Apple notebook and explore the huge horizons of the online world. Born within a few months of Jiri and a little over 100 kilometers apart, Pavla Matikova, as a young girl, grew up in Karlovy Vary, the spa town less than 2 hours' drive west of Prague, formerly called Carlsbad. Her parents were from a modest background, and their divorce in her early childhood shattered the stability of the family unit. Pavla's struggling mother was working almost every day of the week in her souvenir shop, hoping to catch the Russian tourists with her tasteless collection of knickknacks, postcards, and souvenirs. The family barely scraped a living from the sales at the shop, and Pavla could see the strain on her mother's face worsen year after year. She took herself to Prague to finish her schooling and managed to get an offer to move to London as an undergraduate at Imperial College London. Studying during the day and making money and contacts at Spearmint Rhino, the top lap dancing club in London, she quickly became the darling of all the young investment bankers who frequented this famous establishment, most with more money than sense, but loved to spend it on Pavla. That was how she survived and saw a way up the ladder of the corporate world. Jiri briefly entered the dark world of hacking as he also moved to London to study at UCL, one of Britain's top universities. But while he made some good contacts in the hacking field, he then turned to a new passion, artificial intelligence, or AI, as it is usually referred to now. Already by 2015, AI was being recognized as the new mecca for computer scientists. It was slated to dominate business, science, and the online world for the rest of the century at the very least. Jiri's chosen course at UCL was computer science, but although he always shone in tutorials, he quickly found he knew more about AI than any of the lecturers. He went off on a path of his own until he was offered a place at Harris Manchester College, Oxford, to do a PhD in AI, relating to the use and applications of multi-agent technology. This boiled down to creating agent bots with their own form of intelligence, able to interact not only with each other, but also with anything else they found in sophisticated databases. Jiri was amused that the Harris Manchester student residence was called Secura House, after a well-known Prague real estate developer. It turned out there were a few more Czech students there, and Pavla was one of them. Pavla and Jiri could not have been more different. She had total confidence in her model body and flashing green-blue eyes, exuded sex appeal, and dressed as if she had just returned from an extended shopping trip to Bond Street. He was always in sloppy jeans and old sweaters with coffee stains down the front, and would not have been offended to be called a nerdy introvert. It was not that he lacked confidence, he just avoided showing it. They studiously avoided each other for the first week at HMC, but it was a small college with a modest library. Meals were generally taken in the far from grand but elegant dining hall, with some degree of formality no longer the case in some of the larger Oxford colleges. Jiri was already seated in the college dining hall when the stunning brunette Pavla plunked herself down next to him. "Ahoy," Pavla said in the traditional Czech greeting. "Hello," Jiri said without lifting his gaze. She had given recognition to their shared nationality, while he purposely replied in English as a faint attempt to put her in her place and hoping that his fluent English might prevail over hers. She rose to the challenge and, after a few minutes, realized he was not the boring little Czech nerd she had assumed. Copious servings of the college wine were not something either were used to, so by the time they came to almost stagger the short distance to secure a house, the mood was latent with possibility. At least that's what Jiri thought. Pavla felt that it was at least 2 weeks since she had bunked her last London date, and she needed to show Jiri who was boss here. Thus, with clear intent, they made their way to her room in Secura House, where Jiri had to pretend he was not a virgin. Maybe the wine helped his confidence. That unlikely coupling became not so much a relationship as a partnership. Pavla, whose master was in business, saw much more in Jiri than his dress sense or prowess in the bedroom. He was an amazing business case study to put into practice. During his time at UCL, he had become expert in the applications of AI in a novel way, harnessing the power and flexibility of multi-agent technology, something that until then had been ignored in the West. By the time they had both completed their respective masters, they had reached an agreement to launch a new company together, J&P Technology, or J&P for short. Pavla appointed herself as CEO and allowed Jiri to call himself COO. When he demurred and claimed that by rights he should be the CEO as he had invented the software, she quickly agreed they could share that title, but he must remember she was in charge. "Sugar," Pavla said, "as soon as we go looking for our first investors, I will do the talking and flash my eyelids at those greedy middle-aged males who usually make up the majority of angel investors. Plus, I will do the elevator pitches and get those guys literally drooling to hand over their money, so they get the chance to invite me for a business lunch. You, on the other hand, can deal with the techie stuff that their support staff will have, then leave the finance, corporate shit, and flashy lawyers to me." Jiri sensed the irrefutable logic behind this approach. Already he had seen how Pavla had mesmerized a high-powered group of investment bankers that had been invited to the college, trawling for new candidates. He was astonished that during a small and select cocktail party before the college ceremonial dinner, she had managed not only to get business cards from the most important, but also their private cell numbers hastily scribbled on the back of each card. That's how it works, even in the big corporate world. Not much different if you have the looks and charms that Pavla possessed in abundance. "That was some performance," Jiri said. Grinning like a Cheshire cat, Pavla told Jiri, "Get used to it. You do your clever techie stuff and leave me to handle these debiles," which is Czech for idiots, "who can only think with their cocks. There are such stupid men everywhere. Women should always run things." Loosening Pavla's bra, Jiri muttered, "Yes, I absolutely agree." Over her shoulder, he saw the small pile of investment banker cards discarded on the bedside table, next to an opened box of Durex. Little did he know how their partnership would move from strength to strength as J&P Technology took off seriously in 2018, having both completed their masters at Oxford University.